In this video, you will learn how to scale your services without additional complexity of Kubernetes using Docker Swarm. So to continue with this, I will use a previous project that I've used for showcasing django-cookie-cutter. So that's what we'll be using as our base for this. First thing, because I no longer have access to the django-cutter.xyz that I was using before, I will be going with django-cutter.store, which is another domain I bought for $1. So let's just replace all mentions of the Django Cutter direct. All right, that's done. What we now need to do is the database will live in a separate server that is not going to be handled by the Docker Swarm, because it's usually a good idea to keep your database server separate and in a big enough server, because that's usually the first point of failures. Yes, you can just keep adding the number of nodes for, let's say, Django. Like you can have 5 replicas of Django, but Postgres, you should only have 1, and preferably in this server that has enough RAM, CPU, and all that stuff so that your database is fast. So what I'll do now is I'll copy this production.yaml file. I'll change the name to database.yaml. I'll remove everything that is not related to the database, so all this. And as a final step, I'll add the ports, because we need our database server to be accessible outside of our normal inter-Docker communication. So now that that is done, we can remove also Trafiac, and that should be it, so we can save this. Now we need a similar thing for our rest of the swarm. So this is our actual Docker Swarm config, kind of. So we'll call it swarm.yaml. There we have it. And here we will remove just the Postgres, and I believe the last one. Yeah, just the Postgres. All right, now we also don't need this platform, so I'll remove that. And I'll also remove all the mentions of Postgres, because this is now not a service that is being handled by Docker Compose anymore. So I'll remove that one. We'll keep the Postgres environment variable, however, because that's how we will know how to connect to our Postgres server. Now, instead of our environment variable in Postgres or env production.postgres saying Postgres, it will say the IP address of wherever our database is being hosted. Now that that is done, we need to add some config so that we know which services should scale up to what amount. So for that, we have this. This is the deploy configuration for this specific service, so for Django. So for here, we have the resource with the limit of 2 gigabytes of RAM. It will have 3 replicas, so they can be in whatever nodes you have added to your swarm. It doesn't really matter. And one constraint that we have is the node. This will only be running on a worker node, because we don't want our main master node, which is kind of doing all the load balancing, to also handle the actual rendering and all that stuff, because that would just slow down our master node, and now it can't do the main function it's supposed to be there for, which is managing all the worker nodes and load balancing between them, and your website will just get lower. And now, because this Django service is being referenced also in our salary worker, salary beat, and flower, they will copy all the configuration from that service. So we need to have we need to replace those with their own. Otherwise, they would have also 3 replicas with 2 gigabytes of memory and all that stuff. So for that, we have for salary worker, I will put a constraint of 1 gigabyte of memory and just 2 replicas. And this will also be running only on worker node, because we don't want it clogging up the master node. And for our salary beat service, we will just go with 1 replica. We don't really care about having multiple salary beat services, because it's just doing the orchestrating. And why I had to specify the replica here is because if not, it will just go with the default replica of 3 that I already specified in Django. And now the same thing for flower. So just 1 gigabyte, 1 replica, and only a worker. So what is going to run on master nodes then? So master node, that'll be Redis. So it's not going to be guaranteed that it's going to run on a master node, but if it wants to, it can, kind of deal. So traffic is also going to run on a master node, and that's it. So let's just do a final check, make sure there's no other mention of Postgres. That's it. So let's see all the changes that we did. So we added the database.yaml. We have a swarm.yaml with the new configuration. We have in our traffic and everything else, we changed our django-cookie-cutter, the domain, to a new one that I bought. So that's that, and the rest is the same. So that's just the domain changes. Now, finally, one more thing that we need to do. This is something that stumped me for about 30 minutes. The first time I also did this Docker Swarm thing. So we cannot reference the image just by name because our manager node will be handling distributing the images to different servers. So it can't really distribute them just by name, basically. So we need some sort of registry. And for this, I didn't really want to go with Docker Hub because for that I have to pay to make my image repository private. So I just want a locally running Docker service on port 5000, which will handle the images that are going to be created by Docker Compose. So I'll just add this at the beginning. So this is our image repository. This is where it's going to be running. And I'll show how you can get this configured on the server later. But for now, I'll just add this to all of the images that are going to be built like a custom Docker file build. So this one is also being built custom. Redis we're just using the default Redis image, so we don't need to do that here. This one is a custom one, this one is a custom one, and this one is a custom one. So with that, everything should be done. So let's now go to the server side. All right, so for this demonstration, I'll use DigitalOcean. So what I want to do now, because DigitalOcean provides something called snapshots, and for this, I will basically create a swarm of 2 manager nodes and 3 worker nodes. So on each machine, I don't really want to install Docker because that's going to be a requirement. So instead of that, I will create the first manager node where I will install Docker Compose, all that stuff, and take a snapshot. And then when I'm creating the rest of the droplets, I'll just use that as the base. So let's do that. So let's select one region, and remember to stick to this region when you're creating the rest of your swarm. So I'll just go with the basic now 14.14 per month droplet. So I'll call this the master, maybe a manager. No, I think that's the more PC way of saying it. Create. All right, so it looks like our server is done creating, so let's SSH into it. All right, cool, so we're in. Now what we want to do is sudo apt-get update to update the packages versions. And now I can do apt install docker.io and Docker Compose. Yep. Okay, now that is installed, we can take a snapshot of this node and we can just use when we're creating new worker nodes or manager nodes, you can use this as a base. So we don't have to install Docker on each one of them. So for that, you can go into here and then in snapshots and take a live snapshot. It should take a few minutes. Do you want to learn how you can scale your services? Yes. Okay. All right, cool. Looks like our node is created. So now we can create our 5 nodes, I think I said. So let's create 5 nodes, all in the same region again. Just reminding again. So 14 per month. I'll select SSH keys. And let's call it first worker node 1. So let's have 5 of them. So 4. Actually, I think I said 3 worker nodes and 2 manager nodes. So let's go with that. So this one will be called manager node 2. All right, now let's create the droplets. All right, now while those are being created, now what we need to do is we'll have to copy over these environment variables. So let's just do that. So I believe on when you git clone, the .production folder as a whole is ignored. So let's first make that folder. So make there .m/.production. All right, now let's do nano.m/.production/.django. So let's paste all that. Cool. And for Postgres, let's do this. And what we need to also do is we need to create now a droplet just for our Postgres server. So usually with some, you would use something like a managed database if it's for a, I don't know, corporate thing. But if it's just for a side project, I would just go with your self-hosted Postgres instance. So using that snapshot again, let's create a bigger server this time around. Same region again. And personally, for databases, I like to have a dedicated CPU with a memory optimized. Let's go with the cheapest one for now. So $84 per month. Let's select all. And this one will be called DB node. I think just DB node because it's just going to be one of them. All right, let's create. Once this finishes creating, we'll take the IP address of this node and we'll take the IP address of this node and we'll put it in the environment variable that we have. And while this is being done, let's just do a test build to make sure nothing goes wrong. So let's do docker compose -f build. All right, so this is going to take some time. In the meantime, we can check out if our Postgres is done yet. Okay, so what you want to do here is you don't want to copy the outside IPv4. You want to copy the private IPv4 because that's going to be quite faster. Also, it's going to be more secure because you can create a firewall around it, networking here. So in this one, you can add a firewall. So for extra security here, you can add the IP addresses of all your droplets. I like to do that because one time my database server got attacked by somebody who was doing port scanning of all servers. They found out that my 5432 was exposed and then they just hammered it down. I mean, there was still the authentication, which was a pretty secure one, but because they were hammering it down so much, my database was very sluggish and it was not responding to my Django queries. So I turned that off and I just said, okay, I'll only allow connection from these sources. All right, let's see if our DB node is finished. So it is finished. And looks like our build is done as well. So let's say into our Postgres node for now. Okay, believe it's already, we already have it git cloned. So let's now do the same thing. So make dir m/.production. Now let's do a nano/.postgres. And here, let's say this will be localhost. All right. And now let's run it. So docker compose -f, this time we'll do database.yaml update. So it will first build and then it should go up soon. All right, so it's done. Now we can take the IP address of this DB node, or actually we can take the private IP, so this one. This should be faster and more secure. So we can take that and we can do nano here. And in the Postgres host, we'll just change this IP address to this one. All right, so let's do build again. All right, so now it's built. Now, if you remember from before, we need to create a Docker registry so we can push this image that we just built. Okay, for that, we'll just paste that in. All right, we do need to actually initiate the swarm first. So let's Docker swarm with the advertise adder of our pipe private address, because there's two IP addresses associated with this node. So we want to advertise our private IP, so let's do that. All right, now let's do the Docker service create. All right, so now we have a registry running on this master node. So we can now push our image. So we'll say push. So this will push all these images to our repository. Now with the other nodes, we need to now join this swarm that we just created. So we will go to each one. So let's first join using our manager node, second one. So SSH root at this thingy. All right. And we don't really need to go inside django-cookie-cutter actually. So let's wait for this to finish up. And what we need to do is we can do docker swarm this thingy. We can copy this command. So docker swarm, then join token, and then what type of node you're joining as. So we can copy this part. All right, so this is done. So we want to join a new node as a manager. So let's say this, and then it will give us a command. So let's just copy that command, paste that here. And with that, now we've joined this manager node as also joined as a manager. So we can actually delete this. And now let's SSH into each one and do the same thing over there. So yes. All right. And we will do the same thing that we did earlier here, but instead of manager, we will say worker. All right. So it will give us a command. We'll just paste that command and that is joined. So we will do this for all three of our worker nodes. All right, so again, the same command. Paste that there. This is also joined. And this is the manager node. Accidentally click that. Now let's SSH into our third one. All right, let's copy over the same command. And this is also joined. So now all we need to do is docker stack deploy -c to say, okay, this is the compose file. And here we can do swarm.yaml. That's the name of the file here. And the name of the service you want to deploy. Yeah. So here we will just call this django-cookie-cutter. All right. So now it's deploy all these services. So with this, you should now be able to see when you go to this IP address, because we're using Trafiac, it only routes the request if they have this domain. So to do this, we will now need to change our DNS server. So let's just do that quickly. So what we need to do is we need to copy this one and this one and put them in our DNS pay records. So let me just sign into Namecheap and do that right now. Okay, so I'm in, and now I can go to advanced DNS. And here, I will change the A record to this IP and then this IP. So let's copy that. Let's put it here. And this one, so that's the second manager node here. And we'll do that for @ and www. So both of them should point to the ones we just created. So let's save all these. All right. And now if you go there, it will take a bit of time, I imagine. Or it could also be instant. I would hope it's instant. In the meantime, we can check if it propagated yet. So django-cookie-cutter.store. All right, so 157, 161. What is our... Yeah, it's not propagated yet. All right, so this is about an hour later. So let's see if it's propagated yet. Looks like it has. So let's go to /API/docs for the Swagger. All right, and now we can check if we have exercised it. So we should get an error here because we actually haven't run migrations yet. So what we want to do here is you want to run migrations, but it's a bit tricky. So what we want to do is container ls to get the list of all containers running on this node. And we can see that Django is actually not running on this node. So we need to actually go into our worker node, which is where our Django service is running. So here, and we will do docker exec -it, and then the name of the container or the ID of the container, and then back. Now we're inside the Django service. So we can do python manage.py migrate, but here you can see that it actually says an error that we don't have the database URL, because that is actually propagated through an environment variable that is not accessible from directly an environment variable. So it's actually created in a script. So we can get that from our entry point, and we can just copy and paste that to get the new environment variable. All right, and we also need to copy this salary broker URL. All right, and let's start migrate. And all migrations are running. So what we can now do is we can create a super user. So we can log into admin panel. And just a quick one here. All right, so if I remember correctly, now our exercises should show an empty list because we don't have a migrations this year. And our admin URL is going to be based on the environment variable. So let's just copy that. All right. And let's just put in the username and password I just put. Okay. And let's create an exercise with all the workouts and the sets and everything. So task set. Let's just put everything as one today. All right. Let's put test workouts. Day, save. Okay, and now let's execute again. And like you can see here that we have our data. Our API is working. And from this, we can see that our Django service is actually running on 3 different nodes. And because we have a replica of 3 on 3 nodes, so each one is running on a different node. But if we had, let's say, 5 replica, then it would be like, let's say our worker node 3 would be handling 2 replicas and so on. And here in the manager node, you can see that the services that are running are Redis and Redis and registry. So registry is the Docker image registry that we created. And this is a good way to check which services are running, but you don't really have a detailed information of, let's say, CPU usage, memory usage by service or by node, something like that. So for that, it's a bit more complicated in your swarm.config. So I'll show you an example. So here's an example of an actual production ready thing that I'm running. So here you can see that's here you can see all services, my memory usage, my node usage, and all that. And if you want me to cover this, I can cover this in the next video. Just let me know in the comments. All right, so thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Bye now.